I am Rowan Halley. And I've always been the numbers girl. The one who color-coded her allowance into spend, save, invest jars, while other kids traded Pokemon cards. I could balance a checkbook before I could parallel park. My world made sense when it was neat, tabulated, reconciled. What didn't make sense, what never added up, was how my family seemed to subtract me from their equations of pride and celebration every single time. I never imagined my phone would ring at the perfect moment. Right as my sister popped a bottle of champagne in a house I was supposed to own. But, before I tell you how my parents let her steal everything I worked for and still had the audacity to call it family support, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. Let me rewind. I was born in a town where people still read the obituaries in the paper and baked casseroles for funerals. My father, Marshall Halley, was a regional manager for a roofing supply company, never met a stranger and never missed a high school football game. My mother, Leanne, taught 4th grade and wore coordinating brooches for every holiday. They were solid, salt-of-the-earth types, and I was their middle daughter. And yes, I know what you're thinking. There's something about being the middle kid that just feels off balance, like you're the comma no one reads in a sentence everyone remembers. My older brother Wallace was the crown jewel, varsity everything, went to college on a football scholarship even though his knees were glass by 19. My younger sister Briley? She was the charm bomb. Cheerleading captain, permanent Instagram pout, and somehow able to convince my parents that dropping out of cosmetology school 3 times was soul-searching. And me? I paid for my own CPA license with side gigs. I built a freelance accounting portfolio before I had my own health insurance. I spent Saturdays explaining tax brackets to Uber drivers who offered me gum and asked if I was seeing anyone. But in our family group text, I was Rowie, the one they forgot to add when planning Christmas brunch. Not that I cared much, okay, I cared, more than I wanted to admit. But here's the thing about growing up invisible. You learn how to build quietly. You sharpen your instincts, you survive off spite, you count every unspoken slight, and learn to multiply it into ambition. My spreadsheets weren't just numbers, they were walls. They kept me focused, driven, insulated. Every time Breely got a new lease on life or a new lease on a Lexus, I'd pull a double shift and squirrel away more savings. Every time Wallace made the local paper for coaching his kids' t-ball league, I'd add another client to my solo accounting firm. I didn't need headlines. I needed equity, ownership, safety. That's all I ever wanted. A home. Not just a roof. A home, one with my name on the deed, my plants on the windowsill, my dog waiting inside. I'd grown up in a house where approval came in teaspoons, and praise was served only to those who asked loudest. I just wanted a place where silence felt like peace, not punishment. So, I worked. My days were emails, QuickBooks, audits. My nights were freelance gigs, crypto tax consultations, and online courses in real estate. I didn't wear design or anything. I didn't take vacations. I ate rice bowls and used coupons, and still somehow managed to max out my Roth IRA before 30. The math was brutal, but it made sense. And then it didn't. It stopped making sense the moment I heard Breely's voice on a speakerphone I wasn't supposed to be on. I was at Mom's, helping her sort old-school records for a garage sale because I'm the one who always helps, of course. And she left her phone in the kitchen while taking out recycling. It rang, and then it auto-answered. Because apparently Breely is in my mom's favorites. I didn't even mean to listen. But then I heard, "I can't believe you guys let me take that much. What if she finds out?" And Mom's voice, casual as napkin folding, "She won't. Rowan's too busy playing budget queen. Besides, it's family money. It'll even out." Even out. My stomach dropped so hard I thought the linoleum would crack beneath my feet. Even out. I didn't know what it meant, not exactly, but I knew the tone. I knew the hush, the guiltless entitlement marinated in parental approval. I'd heard it 1,000 times before in smaller doses. This one just had a bigger decimal. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't even breathe wrong. I packed the garage sale bins like nothing happened, then walked home in silence, heart pounding like overdue rent. That night, I opened every account, every statement, every line item, and that's when I saw it. My down payment fund, my sacred secret nest egg, was no longer whole. It was gone. And Breely had a new salon opening party next week. The The first time I ever did something impressive, I was 10 years old. My 5th grade math teacher, Mrs. Kavanaugh, submitted my homemade budgeting worksheet to a local newspaper's student spotlight column. They printed it with a black and white photo of me holding a laminated pie chart, beaming in front of a chalkboard. My mom clipped the article and stuck it to the fridge, for one day. The next morning, it was replaced by a printout of Wallace's Pop Warner football schedule. That was the first of many quiet erasures. When Wallace made varsity sophomore year, my parents invited the entire neighborhood to a cookout. Burgers, lawn chairs, even those little paper lanterns strung up in the backyard. When I got into the accelerated math track in middle school, I got a congratulatory post-it on my lunchbox. Spelled my name wrong too, Roan. By high school, I stopped expecting things. I just kept doing them anyway. I graduated early. Took college courses at night while working part-time at a pharmacy. Still made it to Wallace's graduation, Briley's dance recital, and a dozen other events where I stood in the crowd and clapped until my hands went numb. I watched them receive bouquets and camera flash. I once got a used laptop wrapped in birthday paper that still had someone else's login on it. The pattern was always the same. Briley made messes, Wallace played hero, and I cleaned up. Without thanks. When Briley got caught shoplifting in high school, because she thought designer mascara was a human right, my parents told everyone it was a misunderstanding. They said the store clerk was overreacting. When I found the unpaid receipt in her purse and brought it up, my mom said, "You don't need to police your sister. Not everyone's perfect like you, Rowan." Perfect. As if trying to be dependable was some kind of character flaw. In college, I worked nights as a bookkeeper for a bowling alley while taking 18 credits a semester. I slept in shifts and ate peanut butter crackers for lunch. When I made Dean's List 3 years in a row, I emailed my parents a screenshot. My dad replied, "Cool, Briley's thinking of moving to LA for hair school. Big dreams." When she dropped out the second time, they helped her lease a convertible and called it emotional support. Meanwhile, I learned how to stretch $1 so far it begged for mercy. I learned to avoid family dinners unless absolutely necessary. I learned to say, "I'm busy," when I wasn't. I learned that love in my family wasn't unconditional. It came bundled with flashier packaging and lower returns. What I never learned, what no one taught me, was how to be selfish. Or at least, how to want something unapologetically. Until the house. Until the dream that wouldn't shut up no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. I first saw the listing on a Tuesday night, after a marathon of late taxes and caffeine-induced spreadsheet cross-checks. 2 bedrooms, a tiny sunroom, original hardwood, nothing fancy but it had a soul. I bookmarked it. Then, I ran the numbers. The budget was tight, but I could make it happen. That was 6 months before I discovered the theft. 6 months of eating rice and beans, skipping brunches, turning down nights out, lying to myself that I could keep pretending the family I had would someday come around. They didn't. Instead, I found out from a stranger at the grocery store that Briley was finally doing something big. She was opening her own salon. "Her parents are so proud," the cashier said. "Didn't they help her out with a loan?" I smiled like someone who'd just swallowed a tack. At home, I opened my bank apps and triple-checked everything. My savings account, named Haven Fund after the street that little house was on, was missing $43,000. $43,000. Withdrawn through staggered transfers over 3 months. The memo lines were vague: family trust dis B, emergency dis B, shared estate rebalancing. I hadn't shared anything. Certainly not a trust. I called the bank. They verified the transfers were authorized by someone with account access. My parents. Because when I first set it up, I was 20 and naive and thought adding mom for emergencies was smart. Turns out I was right. Just not whose emergency. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my coffee mug until the condensation formed a halo on the wood. I couldn't scream, couldn't cry, couldn't even curse. I just whispered, "Of course." Because that's the part that hurt the most. It wasn't the shock. It was how expected it felt. Like I'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop, only to realize I was barefoot the whole time. I drafted a text to confront them, deleted it, wrote an email, deleted that too. What could I say that they hadn't already rewritten in their heads? So instead, I sent one sentence. To Briley, "Nice salon, hope it was worth it." To Mom, thanks for proving my math was never the problem. To myself, I'll make it back, and this time, I won't tell anyone. It started with a spreadsheet named Plan B. I created it 2 years ago on a Sunday night, after Briley borrowed my car without asking and returned it with a parking ticket, an empty tank, and glitter embedded in the back seat carpet. That night, I sat cross-legged on my floor with a bottle of ginger ale and told myself, out loud, you need a backup life. So I built one. In cells and formulas, quietly, steadily. It began with small cash-based freelance accounting jobs, local businesses who couldn't afford full-time help, a vape shop that paid me in prepaid visas and snacks, a dog groomer with 3 cats and no clue how deductions worked, a tattoo parlor that didn't believe in banks. They all needed someone like me, cheap, quiet, efficient. I took their chaos and turned it into clean, audited order, and in return, they fed my dream. But it wasn't just about side money. I started learning things I'd never been taught in school or in my day job at the local firm. Things like digital bookkeeping integration, crypto tax structuring, how to navigate 1099s for OnlyFans creators without judgment or panic. I was becoming more than just a by-the-book number cruncher. I was evolving. And then came Maggie, my accidental miracle. She ran a niche subscription box service, vintage horror memorabilia curated monthly. Her business was bleeding money. Her last accountant disappeared mid-audit. She was 3 weeks from folding. I offered to audit her entire system for free if she'd let me use the data for a case study. I spent 2 weeks rebuilding her pricing model, slashing wasteful spend, optimizing her fulfillment chain, and restructuring her quarterly filings. By month 3, she was turning a modest profit. By month 6, she had referred me to 7 other small business owners. By month 9, I had a quiet little S-corp with a name no one in my family knew, Ledgerlight Consulting. I didn't have an office. I had a refurbished laptop, 3 browser extensions, a time-tracking app, and a 12-tab Notion dashboard. But I also had 15 monthly clients, consistent retainers, and something else I'd never felt before, leverage. I was still working at the firm by day, of course. They'd never suspect. And why would they? I showed up on time, dressed boring, took notes, didn't cause waves, but every time I watched my boss take credit for my reports, I smiled. Because at home, I was the boss. I was the one signing contracts, setting rates, and sending quarterly recaps with clean margins and polite bite. Still, I didn't tell anyone. Not even my closest friends. It wasn't about secrecy for drama. It was survival. I knew if my parents caught wind, they'd spin it into another Rowan's little hobby narrative. Or worse, they'd try to siphon it for Breely's next business idea. No thanks. So I kept my world split. Professional Rowan by day, CEO Rowan by night. I even bought a fake plant and a corkboard to make my studio apartment feel like an office. I'd talk to myself like a team. Let's circle back on that, Rowan. Great synergy in this email draft, Rowan. Crush the quarterly wrap-up. Pathetic, maybe. Effective, absolutely. It was hard. Some days I wanted to throw my keyboard out the window, other days I questioned everything. But on most days, I felt something that had eluded me my entire life. Pride. Not the kind you perform for others, the kind that sits quietly in your chest and holds your head up when no one's watching. And then the emails started. Small biz owners from forums, referrals, even TikTok. They wanted help. And they didn't want suits or big firms. They wanted someone who knew struggle, who spoke their language, who wouldn't judge them for mixing business with personal charges or for not knowing what a Schedule C was. And I was that person. At first, I turned many of them down. I was terrified of scaling. What if I screwed it up? What if I got too visible? What if someone from my family Googled my name and found the site? But then I remembered the glitter in my car, the overdraft fees from the time I spotted Briley a weekend hotel for her mental health. The look on my dad's face when I told him I wanted to buy a house, like I'd just announced I was joining a circus. So I said yes. I onboarded new clients. I hired a virtual assistant named Lori who lived in Idaho and baked sourdough in her downtime. I paid her well. I paid myself well. I maxed out my emergency fund. I hit 6 figures, quietly, without a press release, without a single congratulatory cake. And finally, I found the house. Haven Street. White trim, blue shutters, a kitchen window facing east. The owners had lived there since the 70s and wanted someone who'd love it, not flip it. I made an offer the same day I toured it, full asking, no contingencies. I was ready, but I never signed the papers, because by the time my offer was approved, my savings had been drained, used to fund someone else's dream, while I was out here living like I didn't deserve mine. They didn't just steal money, they stole momentum. And for a while, I let them. Until something inside me shifted, not like a crack, but a realignment, a quiet seismic decision. This ends with me. I stared at the unopened email from the realtor for 3 days. Subject line, "Congratulations, your offer has been accepted." Timestamp 7:04 a.m. The same morning I discovered the missing money. I couldn't bring myself to delete it. I also couldn't bear to open it. It felt like a door to a life I wasn't allowed to enter anymore, one with plants in the window, a crooked mailbox I'd fix with pride, and mornings where I didn't wake up to the sound of my stomach churning over someone else's decisions. Instead, I spent the week playing damage control. I froze my accounts, hired a lawyer friend to draft a revocation of power of attorney and access rights, filed reports, changed passwords, called the bank twice, cried in one call, yelled in the other. Neither got my money back. The best they could do was a formal investigation and a note that the funds were not subject to automatic restitution given the familial relationship. That one hurt worse than the theft, as if being related to someone was permission enough to rob you blind. The law didn't care about betrayal when it was dressed in the clothes of trust, and my parents? Not a word. Not a call. Not a text. My mom posted a Facebook photo of Braley standing in front of a ribbon-wrapped door with the caption, "So proud of our girl and her brand new salon. Dreams come true with a little help from family." I couldn't even bring myself to comment. All I could do was stare at the screen and whisper, "Yeah, help." The following Saturday I got the dinner invite. Well, invite was generous. It was the annual Halley family dinner, scheduled without consultation, expected without question. A decades-old tradition that usually consisted of lukewarm roast beef, casual misogyny, and unspoken hierarchies. This year it was being hosted at Wallace's place. Big lawn, matching silverware. His wife, Cammie, had a Pinterest board for everything from cocktails to conversation starters. I almost declined. I wrote the text, "Can't make it. Busy," then rewrote, "Can't make it. Just got robbed, remember, but I didn't send it." Something in me refused to give them the satisfaction of my absence. If I didn't show up, I knew how the night would go. I'd become the villain in some rebranded family legend. Rowan couldn't let go of a little misunderstanding. She always was sensitive. She thinks she's better than us just because she balances her own checkbook. No. This time I would go. And I wouldn't go as the invisible one. I wouldn't go to cause a scene either. God, no. I wasn't giving them a performance to mock for years. I would go as the woman who'd spent a decade being better than the storm without ever needing to announce it. And if they wanted to pretend the sky wasn't falling, fine. I'd bring the forecast. So I prepped. I chose an outfit like armor. Simple, solid, structured. The kind of thing you wear when you want to be mistaken for someone who doesn't flinch. I printed my latest business growth chart just for me. Folded it into my wallet. Not to show them. To remind myself who I really was when they started trying to rewrite the script. The day of, I drove there early, parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, sat in the car with my forehead on the wheel, breathing in through my nose and out through my teeth. I thought about my little house. The one I almost had. The one that would have had my name etched into its bones. And then I thought about Briley's salon, probably smelling like cheap hair dye and eucalyptus candles, with her name plastered across the window like she'd earned it. I walked into that dinner knowing 3 things. I had nothing left to lose. I didn't come for their approval. I wasn't leaving until I looked every one of them in the eye and remembered what it felt like to no longer need them. The front door opened before I could knock. Wallace, holding a beer, already grinning. "Look who finally showed up." As if I'd been the late one all these years. Inside, the table was already set. Cammie had written our names on tiny cards shaped like acorns. Mine was spelled Rohan. I didn't correct it. Briley was already seated, air-kissing someone's baby and beaming like she just invented shampoo. Her hair was styled within an inch of its life. Her lips were glossy. Her conscience was clear. When she saw me, she raised her wine glass and said, "There she is, our little calculator." Laughter followed. Light, thoughtless, familiar. I smiled. It wasn't real, but it was calm. Because they didn't know it yet. But this dinner, this tired, smug tradition of theirs, it was about to end. The scent of pot roast and passive aggression greeted me before I even sat down. Wallace, ever the host, pulled out a chair at the far end of the table, next to the pantry door, just shy of the chandelier's warm glow. The placement wasn't accidental. He knew how to stage a family photo and apparently seating charts too. Briley, of course, was dead center, basking in praise like it was sunlight. As I slid into my corner seat, I felt the familiar weight settle over me. The smile I wore like armor. The posture that said, pleasant, not provoked. The polite nods. The intentional silences. These were my traditions. "Rowan," my dad said, voice cheerful but clipped. "Glad you made it. We weren't sure you'd show, what with everything." Everything, in this case, being their conspiracy-level silence over the theft of my life savings. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied with a tight smile. "It's always good to know what gratitude looks like in other households." Cammy shot me a look over her wine glass. Wallace cleared his throat. Briley just blinked. Unbothered, like I was background noise she couldn't mute. "I made your favorite salad," Mom piped up from the kitchen. "Kale and goat cheese, right?" I hadn't liked that salad in 5 years. She knew it. But pretending we were close was her version of damage control. I gave her a nod. She disappeared into the kitchen like she hadn't posted a photo of Briley's salon captioned, "Come. Some kids are just born to shine." We made it through the first 20 minutes with all the usual acts. Wallace bragged about the real estate market like he'd personally invented it. Briley discussed toner trends. My dad told a story he'd already told twice before. Cammy smiled like it was Botoxed into her face. I chewed slowly and answered no questions unless asked directly. But then, right around the main course came the ritual, the interrogation. "So Rowan," Wallace said, cutting into his steak. "Still at that little firm of yours?" I said, taking a sip of water. "You know, I always wondered why you never tried for something bigger, with your brain and all." He didn't mean it as a compliment. He never did. I smiled. "Bigger isn't always better. Some of us prefer profit to prestige." Cammy coughed. My dad jumped in. "Well, speaking of big, Briley's doing something huge, huh?" He beamed down the table. "Her salon is gorgeous. You should have seen her at the ribbon cutting. Real natural leader." Briley waved him off with false modesty. "Stop it, Dad." "Oh no," Mom said, entering with a tray of roasted vegetables. "She deserves the spotlight. She's worked so hard." I tilted my head. "Has she?" There was a beat of silence, just long enough for the subtext to crystallize. "Oh come on," Briley said, laughing it off. "Don't be like that. I know things have been weird, but we're family." "Funny," I said. "I thought family didn't steal from each other." Another silence, this one louder. "Rowan," Mom said gently, setting down the tray. "It was a misunderstanding. You gave me access years ago for emergencies." "Right," I said, evenly. "And you decided Briley's balayage bar was an emergency?" Briley scoffed. "You make it sound like I robbed a bank. It's not like I used it on handbags and Botox." "You used it to open a business I didn't co-sign," I said, keeping my voice level. "With money I earned, without my consent." My dad set down his fork. "Let's not ruin dinner." "Oh, is that what this is?" I asked. "A celebration dinner for the golden child's latest funded failure? What happens when she needs more? You want me to Venmo her a tip?" Mom's voice sharpened. "That's enough." But I wasn't done. Because in that moment, as I looked around the table, at Wallace with his smug half-smile, at Cammy pretending not to be fascinated, at Briley acting like a victim in designer heels, I realized something vital. They weren't sorry. Not one of them. Not for the theft, the betrayal, or the years of being dismissed like background static. They were only sorry that I showed up with a voice. "I just want to know," I said calmly. "At what point did you all decide my work was optional? That my future was flexible? Was there a vote I missed?" "You're overreacting," Wallace said. "It's not like it can't be paid back." "Really?" I said, raising my eyebrows. "With interest? With the 2 years of work I can't get back? With the house I lost?" No one answered. Briley tried to change the subject. "I had to make a move, Rowan. Timing was critical." "So was mine." "But I'm your sister. And I was your safety net, not anymore." Silence settled like dust. I picked up my napkin, folded it neatly and placed it beside my plate. "I hope the roast was worth it," I said, standing, because this is the last dinner I'll ever attend where betrayal is on the menu. And with that, I left. No slamming doors, no drama, just footsteps, and the quietest mic drop of my life. I didn't cry in the car, I didn't scream or hyperventilate or call someone to replay the entire scene like a trauma reel. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the quiet houses around me, the kind of houses with wreaths on the doors and porch lights that clicked on automatically at dusk, the kind of houses people built lives inside. The kind I almost had. My phone buzzed once, twice, then again. I didn't look. I already knew it was the family group chat lighting up like a bad fireworks show. Probably a flurry of deflections. Maybe even a performative worried text from Mom about tone and intentions. Maybe Wallace saying I was dramatic or Cammie suggesting I should learn to let go. I didn't need to read them to know I'd be cast in the role of the problem. It was tradition after. But then, the buzz came again. And again. And then a call, except this one wasn't from a saved number. It was from a New York area code I didn't recognize. For a second I considered letting it ring, but something, intuition, curiosity, fate, nudged me to answer. Hello? Is this Rowan Halley? Yes. This is Dana Wexler. I'm a partner at Sterling & Holden. I got your info through Maggie Brenner. She sings your praises like you're some kind of finance ninja. We've got a client in urgent need of your services. My brain stalled. Sterling & Holden was one of the most well-known boutique VC firms in the Northeast. They funded smart, lean, growth-oriented startups and paid consultants very well. Maggie had mentioned she knew people. I just didn't realize she meant those people. Dana continued, "We've been watching your work. Your turnaround on Box of Screams was insane. How would you feel about onboarding a fast-growth e-commerce client this week?" I sat there blinking like an idiot. I would love that. Great, she said. We'll send over an NDA and a consulting agreement. It's a 2-month contract with renewal options. You'll be lead on financial restructuring. Maggie says you're discreet, fast, and allergic to bullshit. Her words, not mine. I actually laughed. Dana chuckled too. We like that around here. Also, side note, I saw your LedgerLight site. Clean UX, killer testimonials. You've got something solid, Rowan. I don't know who else needs to hear that, but yeah, just wanted to say it. We hung up after trading emails and timelines, and then I stared at the dashboard again, but this time my heart wasn't sinking. It was steady, warm, buzzing, not with panic but with clarity. That phone call was my turning point, not just professionally but personally, emotionally, spiritually, because while my family sat 10 feet away nursing a beef roast and fragile egos, a stranger, someone who owed me nothing, had just validated the worth I'd spent my whole life begging them to see. I didn't need their table, I had built my own, and people were starting to notice. I finally looked at my texts. Was that really necessary? I hope you're okay. But that was a lot, Moen. Please don't throw away family over a misunderstanding. Briley loves you, we all do. Let's talk when you've calmed down. And then Briley. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you always act like you're better than us. Maybe this is just your way of proving it. No apology, no admission, just guilt flipped inside out and sent as a curse. I typed, deleted, typed again, and then finally, I sent just one sentence. Don't worry, you'll never have to compete with me again. And that was it. I silenced the thread, archived the chat, set a new rule in my inbox. Anything from the Halleys goes to junk. I didn't rage, I didn't burn bridges, I just built new ones, away from them. I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the cold wind slice through the leftover heat in my chest. When I parked, I sat in the quiet for a minute and let the new reality settle in. This was the moment it all turned. The moment I stopped waiting to be chosen, and started choosing myself. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, a habit I'd learned during my busiest freelance months. Normally, I'd drag myself to the kitchen for instant coffee and a protein bar, eyes still half closed. But today, I sat up with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years, like something heavy had finally been lifted off my chest, not because the weight was gone, but because I'd stopped pretending it wasn't there. My inbox was already buzzing. Dana had followed through. The NDA, the contract, the onboarding packet, all there crisp and efficient like a hand-delivered invitation to the next chapter of my life. They wanted to start that afternoon. I didn't even hesitate. I signed everything, double-checked the terms, and marked the kickoff call on my calendar. Then, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went back to the Haven Street listing. It was marked, pending, offer accepted. My offer. The one that came with a dream attached. I stared at the photo of the house. Blue shutters, that slightly crooked garden gate, the cracked sidewalk I had planned to fix first thing. It wasn't mine anymore. But it had been, and that meant something. It meant I'd been close, closer than anyone had ever believed I could be. Closer than my family ever wanted me to be. And now I was being offered something bigger than a house. I was being offered power, not the flashy kind you flaunt with cars or vacations, but the kind that lives quietly in your bones, the kind you feel when you know that no one, not even the people who share your blood, can take credit for what you've built. By noon, I was on Zoom with a team of 5 executives from the new client, a fast-scaling wellness startup that had just landed its Series B funding but was hemorrhaging cash due to poor inventory tracking and an overcomplicated affiliate program. In 15 minutes I saw the problem. In 30 I mapped the solution. By the end of the hour, they called me a godsend. After the call, I stood in my tiny kitchen and laughed. Not a big dramatic laugh, just a soft, stunned, little breath of disbelief. Because this was the moment. The moment the call came through. The moment the silence broke. The moment everything they dismissed me for became exactly why I was winning. I pulled up my Ledgerlight dashboard. Checked my numbers. My retainer revenue had officially surpassed my corporate salary. And not just by a little. By enough. Enough to make a statement. Enough to build my safety net back. Enough to move forward without ever looking back. I spent the next hour doing admin work that felt like liberation. Switching my LinkedIn to self-employed, updating my website with new case studies, even ordering new business cards. Then I opened a blank document and drafted something I'd been fantasizing about for years, my resignation letter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. Just a clean, professional departure. Subject, transitioning out of Halley & Clark LLP. I left out the part where I'd started my own firm over a year ago. I didn't need them to know. I didn't need anyone to know. Because this one was for me. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and bathed my apartment in amber light, I heard the ping of another message. From Maggie. Heard from Dana. Knew you'd crush it, told you you're a damn unicorn, proud of you are. And just like that, I felt it. Validation. Not from my family, not from people who only saw my worth when it benefited them, but from someone who chose to believe in me. Someone who saw value where others saw silence. I texted her back, "Thanks, Mags. Means more than you know." Then I turned my phone over, walked to the window and let the evening wind graze my face. Somewhere across town my family was probably dissecting my outburst, probably framing it as ungrateful, maybe even suggesting I'd snapped. Let them. Because I hadn't snapped. I'd snapped out of the pattern, out of the box, out of the role they assigned me before I even knew how to say no. And now I was rewriting the script, and I wasn't leaving any of them in charge of the ending. It took me 3 days to decide whether to respond to my mother's voicemail. She'd called the night after the dinner, her tone syrupy but tinged with a kind of forced gravity, like a kindergarten teacher explaining death to a 5-year-old. "Ro and honey, we're worried about you. The way you left was concerning. You're obviously hurting, and I get that. But we can't move forward if you keep bringing up the past. Call me, okay? Love you." Bringing up the past. As if the wound was old. As if they hadn't reopened it themselves with fresh betrayal just a week ago. I didn't call back. Instead, I waited until Thursday evening, the exact time they were all gathered again for family game night, a weekly event I hadn't been invited to in years. I knew they'd be there. I knew Briley would be holding court, probably still calling me dramatic between mouthfuls of wine and cheese puffs. So I chose that moment, that window of time, to drop my own little truth grenade. I wrote an email. Subject, for the record. I kept it clinical, surgical, unapologetically calm. "Hi all, just wanted to make something clear so there are no lingering misunderstandings. The money taken from my account without my knowledge or consent was not a shared family asset. It was my private, hard-earned savings, accumulated through freelance contracts, consulting work, and tight budgeting over 5 years. I added Mom's name for emergency access during college. That trust was violated. Legally, I could pursue action, but I won't because I'm tired. Not weak, just done. You didn't just drain my account. You drained any illusion that we were in this together. That family meant something consistent, something safe. I've removed all shared access. Please don't contact me about this again. It's not open for discussion. Briley, congrats on the salon. May your success finally be self-funded. Wallace, no need to play referee. You were never neutral. Mom and Dad, I hope you realize the cost of your support isn't just financial. It's permanent. I'm reclaiming what's mine, even if that's just my piece. Take care, Rowan. I hit send. Then I shut the laptop and walked out of my apartment. It was raining. Not hard, but steady enough to feel cinematic. I didn't bring an umbrella. I let it soak through my sleeves as I walked 2 blocks to my favorite coffee shop and ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, a triple-shot oat milk vanilla latte with real whipped cream. It wasn't a house. It wasn't restitution. But it was mine. While I waited, I glanced at my phone. No replies yet? No calls? They were probably stunned. They'd never seen me like this. I'd always been the quiet one. The helper. The one who made herself smaller to fit the spaces they allowed. But not anymore. And it wasn't rage I felt. It was relief. Clean, sharp, irreversible relief. I sipped my coffee like it was champagne and walked home beneath the glowing streetlights, rain dripping off my collarbones, hair sticking to my face. Back inside, I changed into dry clothes and lit a candle. Then I opened my work dashboard. Dana had sent over 3 new potential clients. One of them, a multi-chain co-op that needed help transitioning out of their legacy accounting system, budget mid-6 figures. I chuckled. Then I clicked interested. Let them have their game night, their stories, their excuses. I had a business, a voice, a future that didn't have to ask for permission. And I wasn't sorry for any of it. Not anymore. A week later, I found myself at a different kind of dinner table. This one was mismatched and a little sticky from someone spilling soy sauce and forgetting to wipe it up properly. The chairs didn't match either. One was a bar stool, one a beanbag, and the one I sat on had a loose screw that gave a satisfying wobble every time I shifted. It was Thursday night, but there were no forced smiles, no passive-aggressive salad offerings, no seating arrangements based on social hierarchy. Just me, Maggie, her partner Joe, and their golden retriever who kept trying to lick edamame off my plate. We were going to make something fancy, Joe said, handing me a beer, but then we remembered we don't care about appearances. I smiled. Perfect, I've had enough of appearances lately. Maggie clinked her chopsticks against her beer. To clients who become legends. I rolled my eyes, but I clinked back. They knew. About everything. I hadn't intended to tell them, at least not in full. But after one too many "are you okay" looks and a slip of the tongue about needing a new bank account, the story came out in pieces. I expected shock, maybe pity, but what I got was validation. That's messed up, Joe said, halfway through a dumpling, like deeply, generationally, sitcom-level messed up. Maggie leaned forward. You're not crazy, and you're not too sensitive, you're just the only one who stopped pretending it wasn't broken. I didn't cry, but I did exhale something I'd been holding for years. It wasn't just about the money, or the house, or even the betrayal. It was about the gaslighting, the years of subtle undermining, the rebranded selfishness, the way they made me doubt the reality of things I knew were wrong. With Maggie and Joe, there were no games. No one needed to prove they belonged. We just were. Joe was an illustrator who'd turned down corporate work in favor of community murals and free art classes for seniors. Maggie had worked every crap job in the service industry before she started her subscription business. Neither of them came from money. Neither had families who understood their choices, but both had built lives that made sense to them. And now, they were the people I trusted most. After dinner, we sat on the floor with mugs of tea and talked about dumb things. Horror movies that made us laugh, our worst bosses, the weirdest things we'd ever been paid with. I once got paid in lottery tickets, Maggie once got paid in artisanal jerky. At some point, Joe looked at me and said, "You know, blood doesn't guarantee kindness." And I nodded, because I finally believed it. Growing up, I thought I had to earn belonging, that if I was good enough, useful enough, invisible enough, I'd eventually be invited in. But sitting on that floor, sipping tea that had gone cold, I realized I'd been asking to be chosen by people who were never even qualified to love me properly. And worse, I'd let them teach me that I needed their validation. Not anymore. Now, I was choosing my own people, people who didn't keep score, who didn't weaponize love, who didn't treat loyalty as leverage. Chosen family. I hadn't understood that phrase before. Not really, but now it felt like a lifeline. A few days later, Maggie sent me a text. You free next Friday? We're hosting a DIY dinner. Everyone brings something and tells a story behind it. You in? I replied without hesitation, I'll bring the receipts. Not the actual receipts, not spreadsheets or documentation, but the truth. My voice. My whole, healed, unmuted self. Because after years of waiting to be seen, I had finally stepped into the light, and the people around me didn't blink or turn away. They smiled and made room. I thought cutting ties with my family would feel like sawing off a limb, messy, painful, permanent, but in reality it felt more like removing a splinter I'd let fester too long. The pain was sharp for a moment, yes, but what came after was clean, still, free. I didn't make an announcement, no grand declaration, no social media post with some cryptic quote about toxic energy. I just stopped showing up. To the group texts, to the expectation check-ins, to the exhausting game of who owes who. It started with silencing the family thread, then archiving the photos, then clearing out the old voicemail from my mom. I switched banks, changed locks, hired a financial advisor who wasn't me. I even closed my first ever checking account, opened with Dad when I was 16, because it still had his name on it. It was like closing chapters I didn't write, but was somehow forced to live. For the first time in my adult life, every login, every password, every document was mine alone. No shared access, no just in case, no loopholes to be exploited under the guise of emergency. I wasn't angry anymore. That's the strange part. I thought I'd always carry this slow-burning resentment. But once the weight lifted, there was just space, room to breathe, room to build. Boundaries became my architecture. I didn't answer when Wallace called twice in 1 week. I didn't respond to the text from Cammie that said, "Briley's struggling, could you reach out?" I didn't return my father's email with the subject line, "Family is forever." Maybe it is, but blood is not the same as bond. Instead of folding under guilt, I folded new things into my life. I started therapy, actual therapy, not self-help blogs or late-night journaling, real, licensed, once-a-week, awkward-at-first therapy. The kind where you say things like, "I'm allowed to take up space," and mean it. My therapist Rachel had a bowl of candy on her desk, and a habit of pausing at just the right time to let the silence teach you some. I told her everything, about Briley, about the house, about the quiet hurt of being the reliable one, the one everyone leaned on but never looked at. The one who cleaned up messes but was never invited to the party, the one who saved so hard and still lost everything, until she didn't. Rachel didn't offer magic fixes, but she listened, and sometimes that was enough. Professionally, I thrived. Ledgerlight doubled its client base in 3 months. I hired Laurie full-time and brought on 2 part-time associates to handle onboarding and admin. We hit revenue targets I'd only dreamed of. I raised my rates without apology. I even had the audacity to take weekends off. That first Saturday off, I sat on my fire escape with iced coffee and absolutely no emails to answer. I watched a crow land on the building across the alley and peck at something shiny. It was nothing really, but it felt like a sunrise. I started letting joy back in, too. Small things. A new pair of sneakers I didn't wait 6 months to justify. Repainting my kitchen wall sage green because I liked the name of the color, soft boundary. Getting a dog, a mutt named Ledger because of course. And slowly, people noticed. Not the ones I'd left behind, but the ones I chose to keep. Clients sent thank you gifts unprompted, friends referred friends. Maggie hosted another dinner and toasted me as the person who taught us spreadsheets can be sexy. And me? I started showing up to my own life. Not out of obligation, but out of ownership. Because for once I wasn't just surviving around other people's choices. I was living inside my own. And it was beautiful. You know what nobody tells you about rebuilding from scratch? There's a kind of joy in it that's so quiet, you almost miss it. It doesn't come with fanfare or applause. It's not in the big moments, like signing a client contract or seeing your bank account finally hit 6 figures again. No, it's in the tiny things. The way your shoulders unclench when a number matches the budget you built. The sound of silence after dinner, not filled with doubts or replayed arguments, but just peace. That's the feeling I chased when I started giving back. Because once my house dream was gone, once the down payment had been drained, I realized I'd spent so long trying to build something for me, a safe place, a finally place, that I forgot I had the tools to build that for others too. So I did. I created a fund, not a charity, not something with my name plastered across the top like a vanity project, just a quiet little grant program for underdog entrepreneurs, especially women, especially ones who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or chronically sidelined like I was. We called it the Second Try Fund. Maggie helped me brainstorm the name, Joe designed the logo, my assistant Laurie organized the intake forms. Our first grantee was a woman named Desiree, who ran a food truck and couldn't get a loan because her ex tanked her credit and ran off with the last of her startup money. Sound familiar? We gave her $5,000, enough to cover her permits, equipment maintenance, and a month of supply inventory. No strings, no complicated paperwork, just trust and a single rule. Keep your receipts, and never explain your ambition to people who won't understand it. She cried on the Zoom call. I did too. By the end of the first year, we'd helped 9 small businesses get back on their feet. Not millions, not unicorn startups, just real people trying to make honest things work. And every time I sent the approval email, every time I clicked transfer, I felt like I was healing an old version of myself, one transaction at a time. Not to prove a point, but to rewrite the legacy. Because if the Hallie name couldn't stand for integrity, then Rowan could. My last name was still legally Hallie, sure, I hadn't bothered changing it. But I stopped using it in my branding. I stopped letting it precede me like a silent shadow, reminding people where I came from. Now people knew me for what I'd built, not what I'd been born into. Sometimes I wondered if they still talked about me. If Wallace ever admitted, even in a whisper, that I'd been right. If my parents ever missed me, or just missed the version of me who didn't talk back. If Briley in her echo chamber salon full of ring lights and borrowed money ever stared into the mirror and thought maybe I went too far. But I never called, never texted. Because some doors, once closed, don't creak open with time. They stay shut to keep the peace inside from leaking back out. And mine had stayed sealed. I decorated it with a wreath I bought at a thrift store and put a little sign next to it that said, "Quiet success still counts." One day, Laurie joked that I should put that on a t-shirt. I just smiled and said, maybe. But the truth, I didn't need it on fabric. It was written all over my life. In the business I built, in the people I helped, in the boundaries I drew, and the ones I never let anyone cross again. Because when they took what they took from me, they thought they were breaking me. All they did was reveal what was left standing after the dust. And it was mine. I never got the house on Haven Street. By the time I rebuilt the down payment, it had long since sold. The shutters were painted green now, the garden gate replaced, the crooked charm wiped clean. I drove by once just to see. There were wind chimes on the porch and a pair of muddy sneakers by the door. A life was happening in there, and it wasn't mine. But I didn't feel loss, I felt distance, the kind you earn. I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet for a moment. Not to grieve, but to reflect. Because that house wasn't the finish line anymore. It was just a symbol, a milestone that used to mean safety, arrival, proof. I didn't need proof anymore. I was the proof, and my safety, my arrival? It lived inside me now. So I drove away, rolled the windows down, and let the sun hit my arms. It was a Thursday, but I wasn't working. I'd started scheduling in rest like it was a client. Blocked off entire afternoons for nothing. For wandering. For remembering I was more than billable hours and efficient workflows. I walked downtown, bought myself a blueberry scone that crumbled like sand in my hands, and sat on a bench watching strangers hurry past. I felt no urge to keep up, and somewhere between the crumbs and the breeze, I realized I was proud. Not loudly. Not in a fist-pumping way. Just quietly proud. Of what I'd survived, of what I'd built, of who I'd chosen to become, despite where I started. There would always be pieces of the old story, names, faces, wounds that sometimes throbbed on rainy days, but they weren't running the show anymore. They were chapters. I was the author now. I didn't need a big public redemption arc. I didn't want revenge or reconciliation wrapped in false niceties. I just wanted this, a good cup of coffee, clean books, a full inbox, chosen family, and peace. I had all of that. I had me. And in the quiet of that truth, I found something I never thought I would. Freedom. Have you ever realized you were the only one holding your family together, and they didn't even notice when you let go? If that question hits you right in the gut, you're not alone. Maybe you've been the invisible one, the reliable one, the one who gets guilted into silence while everyone else gets celebrated for doing half as much. Maybe you've sacrificed so long, you forgot what it's like to do something just for you. If any part of my story felt like yours, drop a comment. Tell me your moment. Tell me when you walked away, or when you finally decided to stay gone. Because someone else out there needs to know it's not selfish to choose peace. It's not dramatic to demand respect. It's not cruel to set boundaries that protect you from the people who taught you to tolerate harm. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Because here's the truth. You don't have to prove your worth to people who only love you when it's convenient. You don't have to shrink to fit the version of you they're comfortable with. You can outgrow them and still wish them well. And when you do, don't apologize. You didn't walk away from your family. You walked back to yourself.